With all of you, Claudio Guglieri.
What about back? This one? Okay. Hello, hello, hello. How's it going? All right. This is quite a stage. I'm gonna leave my water here. Everybody ready? Okay, let's get started. Listen, we are in Paris. The year is 1840. Paris is the capital of arts in Europe. People come from all over the world to study in the School of Fine Arts. And it is at that time where Eugene Delacroix, who was one of the leads of the Romanticism movement, was able to witness for the first time the invention of photography. This is something that blew his mind because, again, as a painter, he saw the future. He saw the potential for something that was going to change the industry moving forward. So he reached out to someone that was living and being a great artist back then, Jean Auguste Dominique Angot. That's apologies for my French. And he said, Jean Auguste, listen, something is about to change. It's time for us to experiment. It's time for us to get weird. Now, fast forward, we're in London, 1869. This is a time where the Beatles have been making hit after hit for the last 10 years. Now they come together to create one last album. They get together in Abbey Road Studios, and for the next 2 weeks, they have to create something from scratch. Obviously, as they go through all this motion, the stress builds up. So, George Harrison, he bought this Moog synthesizer a few years ago, and he got a glimpse of, what was going to be the future of music in many ways. So he approaches Paul and says, Paul, it's time that we get to experiment. It's time that we get a little bit weird. Now, we fast forward, New York, 1897, the place to be. Listen, the city at this point had some of the most famous graphic designers in the world living there. You had Milton Glaser, who at that point had done the I Love New York identity and all this work for Bob Dylan. He heard of this company in California that came up with this computer graphic program that allowed you to create designs in the screen. That was unheard of. But Milton was like, there's something here. I think the industry is about to change. So he reached out to Massimo Vignelli and said, Massimo, listen, shit is about to get crazy. It's time for us to experiment. It's time for us to get weird. And that's what I want to talk about today. Listen, some of this may or may not have happened. That's okay, don't hold me accountable. But it illustrates a point. It illustrates a bigger point. These are 3 moments in history where there was a creative disruption that really changed the path for a field of arts. What I want to do with you for the next 30 minutes is I'm going to dive into the history of this. We're going to go back in time. We're going to learn together how people reacted to these inventions, how they adopted to it, how they incorporated them in their workflows, and the decisions they made moving forward that really got to influence the rest of their career. Before all that, who am I? Why am I talking to you? Hi, everybody. My name is Claudio Guglieri. I'm a designer. I'm actually from Spain. I know you've been to Spain, and you may like it. I'm not from Madrid. I'm not from Barcelona. I'm from this city in the south called Malaga. I recommend you never visit this city. It's not a good place to be. Listen, I got out as soon as I could. I never go back. Please do not go. I don't recommend it. Okay. I just happen to know there's a few people from Malaga as well. Listen, I'm a designer. I'm a designer of many things. For the past almost 20 years, I've been working as a designer, both in-house and on the agency side. I work at Microsoft on Fluent Design. I work as a freelance for a bunch of clients here in the Bay. I was the head of design recently on this small startup called Oppo Camera. And recently, I joined my friends at Work & Co. That is part of Accenture. And the rest, is still to be written. But I'm excited to be here and to enable the future. So let's go through this journey. It's time to get weird. Now, tell me, what do you see these comments may have in common? Can you guess the theme here? I'll tell you. Change is hard. It's hard with a capital H, a hard D, hard, extremely hard. We all love the idea of like new, and yeah, sure, we love listen to new music. But every year we go back to our summer, our high school hits, and we're like, oh, this is the real music right here. Um, it's hard. We individually we like it, but as a collective, humans together, we don't appreciate change. We favor the current state of the world, and we attribute, we think because something exists, it already has to be better than something that, maybe is not in existence or something that is brand new. In any case, what I learned on the past, honestly, almost 20 years is that change is what's constant to our industry, our line of work. So let's go back in time. Let's go back in time to Paris, to the invention of photography. This is Louis Daguerre. He is credited as the father of photography. He invented and announced and shared what's called the daguerreotype. He was a scientist. He was a scientist. He was a painter. Obviously, later he became a photographer. And as I said, he invented the daguerreotype. He was familiar with this idea of the camera obscura, which is this basic principle of having an enclosed space where light cannot go in, then having a small hole with a lens where light goes in, and then whatever image gets somehow fixed in a surface. So that was something that he was familiar with, and through experimentation and collaboration with many other people, got to develop the first reliable, camera, I guess. Listen, this invention was not perfect. Initially, it took I think it was 15 hours of exposure. Then it got down to 15 minutes. And then 1 or 2 years later, got down to 1 minute. But still, 1 minute of exposure is partially the reason why all these portraits back in the days, they were pretty stiff. You couldn't move. One fun fact, this image right here, bottom left corner, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a person right there. And that photo, it took 15 minutes of exposure to take it. So somehow this person did not move for 15 minutes and ended up being the first person in a photograph ever in history by doing nothing, which is quite remarkable. Anyway, photography came out, and you could imagine, reactions were all over the place, right? You had famous writers, Edgar Allan Poe saying this is the most important and perhaps the most extraordinary triumph of modern science, right? The most marvelous invention of the century. But, then again, there was nothing like this before. So inevitably, there was some fear. This was the first time beyond painting that, we were able to fix a moving image. So again, the most religious point of view, this was almost considered like a sacrilege, something that should not happen. Again, in the context of arts, it was pretty threatening. It was considered, art most mortal enemy because, again, there was a glimpse of what was about to happen. And if you think about it, it made sense. For centuries, artists have relied on this idea of being almost like divine and being touched by God. That's how the promoters of Da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, that's how they promoted their work. It gave their work this aura that went beyond the craft. And it led to more work, which is kind of the point. Artists did not share their processes back then. There was no Reddit, there was no YouTube tutorial. They were pretty secretive. You have to join their worship. You have to, first of all, be talented enough to join their worship and then spend your whole life to be able to learn how they achieve those results. So, it wasn't just fear of losing status, but fear of losing their livelihood, really. Painters, funny enough, were the main reason why the camera was invented. It was all the early inventions that painters did to ultimately fix an image into a 2D canvas that led to the invention of photography. But in any case, for centuries, painting has been guided by this statement of Da Vinci that says the most praiseworthy form of painting is the one that resembles the most what it imitates. And that with photography, it was totally done. They were cooked. That was it. Now, let's go back into the future a little bit. We are in New York, not New York City, Trumansburg. This is where the first commercial synthesizer was invented. Now, musicians, just like designers, artists, we in general curious people. So for many, many decades, musicians have been already experimenting with this idea of creating electronic sounds. One of the early experiments is actually in the 1920s called the theremin. I don't know if you've seen this before, but basically, depending on the distance from your arms to the couple of antennas, you could create different kind of sounds. Sounded like this. Really iconic. Now, you can hear this instrument play through a lot of different movie scores back in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s. Even in the 60s, it made it to one of the Beach Boys songs. Let's see if you can spot it. I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving it became, it was a bit of a novelty. It never made it big, but again, step one into this journey of electronic music. What happened in the 40s, 50s is that radio shows and TV started becoming more popular. Well, TV was invented and then became popular, but there was an increasing need from studios to actually create sounds without having to put a whole orchestra together. So there were a few inventions over time, the Martinaud, the Novachord, RCA Mark II. In fact, the BBC put together a team, the Radiophonic Workshop, whose only job was to create sounds for, again, radio shows and TV shows. I want to play for you one of the songs that was composed by Delia of Derbyshire, which is actually the first theme song for the show Doctor Who. Now, this played for the first time in 1963, I believe. And just think about this. In 1963, people were listening to like the soft Beatles, not even the rock Beatles, the soft Beatles, the P.S. I Love You, everybody's stiff, playing guitar, not moving, super, super like soft. And suddenly, you're a kid. You turn on the TV, and this comes in. It's a banger. It's a banger, but you have to position this in the 60s again, like soft melodic rock, really like toned down lyrics. Suddenly, this is like sci-fi. It was mind blowing. Now, all these instruments, all these like inventions led the road to the first commercial synthesizer. It was created by Robert Moog, and of course he called it the Moog, in the 60s. And it was created with a lot of feedback from musicians of the time, right? So it already hit certain notes that they wanted to hit. It had a keyboard as an input method. It was a bit more affordable. It was modular. It's a bit more practical. It had a whole interface that, in theory, allowed you to have total control over the sounds that it was created. It became really popular among those that could afford it back then. So Mick Jagger got one really early on, the Monkees, George Harrison got one, people that were willing to experiment and could afford it. But it wasn't all just enthusiasm. There was a lot of like resistance and reluctance to this machine that now could recreate sounds that otherwise would be a person playing an instrument. So Queen famously was mistaken of using synthesizers, and they took that upon themselves. And for like 5 or 6 albums, they used to claim all the time, and they would write down, no synthesizers. We don't use synthesizers in our album because, in some way, play on this idea of like sound being fake, not being the real thing. You have other quotes from King Crimson saying, these instruments allow you to fake it, or, one-man synthesizer band will never replace the sweat and the soul of a real group. Now, let's move on to something closer to us, design tools. We gotta go, again, to the future. We're here in California when digital design rather, enters the stage. Listen, the birth of digital design came from some of the early funding from the government in this program called ARPA that basically gave a bunch of grants to different universities across the country, funded all this public research on computing and learning about computers. So you have like really early examples from the MIT with this sketchpad that you could actually use it to paint directly on the screen. You had SuperPaint that would allow you to paint on this tablet that would again translate your drawing to the screen, and some early commercial explorations on the Macintosh. But it wasn't until 1982 where 2 ex-Xerox PARC researchers came and created Adobe as we know it today. They first worked on this language called PostScript that allows printers to communicate with the computers. And on top of that, they built, and this is where I wanted to get to, Illustrator, 1987. Illustrator allowed for the manipulation of graphics through a graphical user interface. We know that's what we do. And it was mind blowing. It was a revolution when it came out. Now you could create all sorts of assets and all sorts of things that before would require a lot of artistry, really. And just to put this in perspective, we got to really understand what was happening in the world of graphic design back then. It was an extremely manual and painful process to do design. It was not really an environment that would allow you to take many risks, as everything came with a price tag and a time tag. So we had like X-Acto knives, we had like T rulers, like triangle rulers. You had like this wrap down text that you would take typography and like write it down. If you wanted, let's say, a title with a certain type, a certain weight, you will work with a typesetter and there will be a 24-hour workaround. Then you have to paste everything with this slightly toxic cement glue on a page. Not a great, not the job that you dream of back then. So when Illustrator came out, I mean, honestly, there was some fear, but most people really never look back. However, again, the big celebrities, design celebrities of the time, they wasn't reluctant. So Milton Glaser was really concerned about trading basically the soul for convenience, right? So he says computers are to design as microwaves are to cooking. Paul Rand, in a really humorous way, because that's his personality, he said it's important to use your hands. It's what makes you different from a cow or a computer operator. But computer operator cow, same thing, I guess. In the computer age, Massimo Vignelli, the proliferation of typefaces and type manipulations represents a new level of visual pollution threatening our culture. Massimo Vignelli, famous for using a really reduced set of typefaces, of course, was worried about this pollution that will happen. So hopefully you see some lines where we are today, where a couple of years ago, there's an initial threat. There's this quick democratization of the medium that is a little bit scary. Everybody can produce and create now. Sorry, I see the camera is freaking me out. There's the fear of losing humanity, this fear of delegating creativity to a computer or polluting culture. So all those valid concerns that inevitably they come out every once in a while. Now, we're curious creatures. We work in a creative environment. Curiosity and creativity go hand in hand. So after that early dismissal of fear, we always try to make it work. We always try to see like, well, all right, that tool is scary, but is there something I could use? Is there something I could use this tool to improve my workflows? So we go into early adoption. The impact of photography on painting, beyond, as we will see later, and Catherine mentioned before, freeing photography or freeing painting from photorealism, it had a pretty immediate impact in those that live in the fringes of kind of like the main culture, not at the highest levels of craft. So there was this movement in the 1800s where American families used to commission portraits of their family as a sign of identity and status. So you have a lot of self-taught painters traveling the Midwest in a wagon, and they have all these like price tags of like, this is the money if I only spend this amount of time, if you want shadows, if you want that. They had it all like almost like a subscription design agency, all broken down into different parts. That movement quickly died with photography because now you could take a photo. In fact, many of these artists became photographers themselves. At the highest levels of craft, though, photography started to peak in the process. There were certain pain points in the world of painting that photography actually could help with. One of them was sittings. It would take 10 to 15 to 20 sittings to get a portrait of yourself done. That meant 20 sessions of 1 hour, fully clothed, like, all ready for, ready for the show, but not moving for an hour in front of a painter. Now with photography, you could take a photo, they could go off to their studio, play up to 80%, and then come back, for the final touches. Another thing that it helped with was composition. This is almost like the beginning of this like, arts and crafts that you could take one thing, collage, I guess. So again, you could take a photo of a specific posture, not even the person you wanted to paint, and you could create a whole environment around them. Same thing with the study of light. And the ability to capture like fleeing scenes, right? Like, of course, if you were a really good painter in the past, you could always like, go off with your imagination. But now with the camera, you could capture a moment in time that wasn't, a rigid portrait. It was more like something that says more about the person more than, a portrait itself. So again, photography wasn't perfect, but it helped with a lot of pain points that painters had at the time. Now let's go with music. Listen, the moment the Moog came out, it was a mess. It had a big manual of instructions, but there was something really attractive about it. Right away, we see some hits already coming out that were created with the Moog synthesizer. You have Wendy Carlos. She created this album called Switch On Back that ended up winning 3 Emmy Awards. And it's the first classical music certified platinum album, which is crazy. It sounded like this. All right. You have the Monkees. They have the first song that was created where the Moog came in theory, in history, the first song. Let's see if you can spot it. Pay attention to the dance. It's awesome. Anyway, it starts to become a bit more mainstream. You start seeing that in different places. CBS News actually commissioned this song from was like Moore Garson Moore Journey for the broadcast of the Apollo 11 landing on the moon. What a time. Now, listen, the Moog synthesizer, it sounded weird. It wasn't the orchestra we were promised, but it gave a lot of control to one person, right? And that became something really, really attractive back then. Now, in terms of design tools, this early adoption on design tools comes also really fast. You know, early in the days, Adobe scheduled a bunch of different workshops. They call it influencing the influencers, where they brought people and tried to teach them how to improve their workflows through this new tool. They commissioned work from people that were already doing graphic work that already resembles a little bit what you could do with Adobe Illustrator. You had this, Ron Chang was one of the first working for Adobe that went to do a lot of magazines covers on himself. And then, Times Magazine and other publications, they switch right away their workflows, especially when creating infographics to Adobe Illustrator. So, if you think of where we are with design tools, right? The first version was black and white. Actually, let me start from the beginning. Photography, it was only black and white, required a big setup. It was expensive. Synthesizers were expensive. They were monophonic. Design tools, they were expensive too. You still need to buy a computer. It was all black and white. It wasn't quite what you see is what you get. But, then again, photography, faster, reduced settings, more creative control. Synthesizer, one person being able to emulate a lot of sound or a whole orchestra. Design tools, faster, easier, editable. That was a big thing back then. So Gen AI, let's be honest, like quality is still clunky, not super reliable. The ecosystem is really complex. I could tell you my workflow today, and it will be different in a couple of months for sure. And the tech is far from perfect, but it is faster, it is cheaper, and it's accessible. So again, those small things suddenly are just enough for people to start getting excited about things. Now, let's jump to the third phase, which is the inevitable breakaway. Just thinking in the world of painting, as Catherine called out before, photography really gave artists the freedom to, not having to replicate reality, and it actually forced them to explore new perspective of painting, new dimensions of it. So the leading art movements back then in Europe were neoclassicism and romanticism, and sure, the subjects were different, the topics they were touching on were different, but they were still guided by this idea of, it has to look real. That's what the quality is like. Impressionism was the first movement that deviated from those, again, the photorealistic norm and explored color, light, movement. You can see it doesn't try to compete with photography anymore. It tries to capture what photography can capture. Photography on itself took, a whole different path, right? From those initial really rigid portraits, now you start seeing portraiture that is a bit more intimate, it's a bit more meaningful, it's a bit more complex, it communicates more about the person. With portable cameras and the rise of, the magazine, photojournalism become its own thing. You have Robert Capa traveling the world, documenting some of the wars that were happening in Spain, in the south of France, etc. What about music? Let's say this is where it gets weird. Um, Listen, in the world of music at that point, there were artists that were already, natively electronic, and some others that quickly changed to electronic music. So, four bands worth calling out. You had Kraftwerk in Germany with Autobahn, again pushing and creating what will be techno for the first time in Germany. You have Brian Eno, who started in glam rock and then transitioned to using the synthesizer for everything. He explored a lot of different soundscape and like new song structures that we take for granted today, like this lo-fi music. That's really all because of the explorations that he made. You have Giorgio Moroder, the father of dance. You have Wendy Carlos, who explored a lot of electronic music and classical orchestration. All these artists, they start to become more popular. And as they do so, they partner with mainstream artists at the time. So you have Brian Eno and David Bowie collaborating in Heroes. Giorgio Moroder and Donna Summer on I Feel Love. And listen, Wendy Carlos has done at that point the soundtrack of The Shining, Clockwork Orange, but now she gets to do Tron. Right, and then Giorgio Moroder with Never Ending Story, was born in the 80s, and I know what I'm talking about, or Scarface. All right, so in terms of breaking away, design tools really go wild. I mean, listen, design in general, we never look back. As simple as that. From that early adoption, we just kept moving forward. So as I said, Times Magazine switched all their workflows to be on Illustrator. Again, it allowed to edit things without having a big, as complicated as it used to be before when everything was manual. So you start seeing some of these Illustrator flavors back then. Now, in 1990, they released Photoshop, and that again, for the first time, it gives tools to people that never had those tools before. If you were a photographer and you wanted to now add a blue filter to whatever photo you took, you have to go in the darkroom again, develop this thing, put a filter. It would be a lot of work. Now there's an easier way to get there. It didn't stop with design as we know it. Like it also helped industrial design, architecture with AutoCAD, and really it was like the perfect mix of again technology, technical evolution, technology, art, and design tools coming together that came all at this point where the internet was created. There was the first browser in 1994, I think, is when CSS first gets announced and like expanded. We get the CSS, St. Garden, and all that. Suddenly, we can apply design to a whole new platform that never, doesn't have it, and that became global. It's crazy. So again, tools started really at the beginning, obviously, really geared toward print. But then over time, they evolved, right? So now it's not just Quark Express, Freehand, Photoshop, PageMaker. Now you start seeing Adobe Premiere for filmmaking. You start seeing the first version of Adobe Dimensions. You start seeing programs that are like natively for the web, like Macromedia Fireworks or Dreamweaver. Early in the 90s, you have Macromedia doing Shockwave, Director, and that leads to Flash, and that led to a whole expressive revolution. So then again, you can see how photography Fred paintings for realism. It created a new category. Synthesizers did not ruin music. It gave more people more access. It expanded the creative toolkit for musicians, and design tools really revolutionized the printing industry, revolutionized photography, gave life to the internet as a storytelling medium, and again became more and more accessible with every new release. So just to wrap it up, thank you for your patience. I want to talk about a few takeaways. What can we learn from these moments in time that is applicable today in some way? Maybe, and I should say that today is really different from back then. It's a whole different ball game, I guess. The access to tool is completely different. Now is extremely cheap, if not free, to access some of these templates and to automate some processes. Distribution now is completely different. Everybody's a publisher. There are tons of platforms that allow, again, for someone to put something out in the world. Not that it will reach everybody, but at least you have, that first step that before just didn't exist. Connectivity, what can I say? Everybody's super connected. The speed of execution has gone from weeks to days to hours to minutes. And originality has probably a bigger value now than it had back then. Dell Designs is also the world. It's not just a neighborhood. So, a few learnings here that I think evergreen is that busy work, is not meant to last. And I think about this often myself. Every time I'm at work over the years, I always question how much of this is trading my time versus trading my skill. Now, if I go again back in time in the context of design, there was a lot of manual work that was not creative work back then, right? Paul Rand said a computer operator, but I don't know. I think computers at that point even maximize creativity over, the nuances of knowing how to use a ruler and the rapidograph and not blowing it, and making sure everything is ready for the printer, etc. So if you find yourself doing a lot of busy work, just be mindful that that might be hopefully soon done for. Um, don't wait till it's perfect. This, what you're seeing right now, is the first photograph or the oldest photograph that we know of in history. This is the one I was saying before. It took 15 hours to take. Now, if you show this to the wrong person in 1938 and say, "What do you think of this?" The wrong person will look at it and be like, "It's okay." They will not see the potential of it. They'll be like, let's get lunch." So we cannot wait till something is perfect to start, getting our hands in it. We actually have to see the potential. The MOOC wasn't perfect; it sounded kind of weird, but the potential for a new genre of music was there. Again, photography, design tools, Illustrator didn't have a lot of support for type initially, but the potential was there. What are we looking at today that is not there, and we know it's not there, but has a lot of potential? Familiar paradigms work better. Listen, when the first setups for photo portraits were pretty similar to the first setup for portraiture in painting, right? The MOOC had a keyboard that musicians already know how to use, as opposed to punch cards like the Nova Chord or the RCA Mark II. Switch on Back, the first ever popular electronic album, was based on a composer that was long gone and whose music we were all familiar with. Illustrator was originally promoted as a way to trace your drawings done elsewhere. The point being here is familiarity, facilitate comprehensions and acceptance. So again, it's always a powerful tool to keep in mind. New breakthroughs take time. It just takes time. Like imagine, now the person we show the first photograph, imagine we put that person in the 50s, and we in the 50s or 70s, and we show them the first Giorgio Moroder album. They'd be like, all right, so I guess electronic music is invented. Let's move on. It's not invented. I mean, could you imagine listening to the first electronic song that 50 years later will have the Justice, the Kavinsky, the Daft Punks of the world? Like, how much is that evolution? We're so early right now that it's hard for me to envision what this is going to be in 50 years, because there's no way. We have to write that history. It doesn't exist. I believe, though, with that said, our comparison criteria are holding us back. What I mean by this is I see online the way these tools are being promoted. We see this every day. Oh, look, this looks real. It must be good. It's so close to reality. And there's always this this is crazy, nothing is real anymore. There's this anxiety that we see. There's a lot of indexing on, being closer to an older medium. It looks like a movie. It looks like the real thing. And I get it. We're still in the adaptation part of it, but I believe that's holding us back. I will rather focus on how expressive something is. You could spend millions doing something, or you could spend $9 copying something. I look forward to the time where it's not about, again, cheap, fast, accessible, but rather expressive. Yeah, I blurred the name though, because I'm not that kind of person. Um, anyway, listen, breakthroughs, if you look back in history, breakthroughs create new opportunities. What I mean by this, if you pay attention to painting created a whole new genre. It empowered people and forced people to think different about the art, right? About how they want to express themselves. It created a school of, arts, a school of thoughts, like all sorts of like different executions, ramifications came from it. Dance, again, electronic music created dance music, techno, synth pop, electro pop, um, all sorts of like again manifestations of arts and feelings that came to be because of that initial seed. Uh, Digital design really gave first step towards interactive design slash different shapes of interactive design like video games and the whole interactive industry that I've been living off for the past 20 years. What is Gen AI contribution to the art? I don't think, and you can quote me on this, maybe I'm wrong, I don't think making shorts with AI is the contribution to the art. I think that's adapting to what we have today, and it's an easy way to understand, what's now, what's forward. But I think this still has to be decided. Is it, is the contribution to the art that we can? Is it about storytelling? Is it about personalization? I don't know, but it cannot be just. It just looks real, good, and it costs cheap. It was good. No, that's not enough. Um, Gotta move fast, man. AI is the final boss. I mean, I say this as a designer and aspiring artist. I mean, this thing is training our shit, and I'm not gonna get into the morality of it, but something to keep in mind is, the time to tool that I'm calling basically the time from when a trend is created to when a trend is finally assimilated. It just gets shorter and shorter. I mean, just look at like filmmaking. You have Kurosawa credited for one of the first uses of slow motion, especially in the context of an art scene, of an action scene. This is in 1954, right? It was mind blowing back then. My first memory as a person, not saying this is history, but my first memory as a human of seeing slow motion was in Snatch, almost 25 years ago. It blew my mind. Well, now I can go create a free account and I can punch my face for free in less than 5 minutes. Um, the thrill is gone. That's not a good idea. If you're in a room trying to come up with a good resolve to a fighting scene, and you say, "I have an idea. What if we punch our faces?" They're gonna be like, "Well, we could do that for free. Where's the novelty in that?" So that time of assimilation of a trend, because of the way AI is trained, it's just going to get shorter and shorter. There's definitely a positive aspect to this, right? Is accessibility, democratization, that is amazing. And then there is a not so positive, or maybe it's what we need. It's a bit of a kick in the back. Now we're going to be always forced as creatives to step it up. Always see what's there, see what everybody's digesting every day, and come up with something that is suddenly, transforming or surprising to an audience. So again, if we were there, it's going to get pretty short. Listen, just to go with a positive note, AI is the engine, but we are still the drivers. The ability to encode and decode culture is still human. I mean, just think about the Brad Summer. Would AI say like, "Oh, let's make a green cover and put Brad on it, and it should be a revolution"? It's not going to happen. It's all about encoding and decoding culture. I love this quote from Gary Newman. This is in the context of music. He says, "People thought machines did it. Believe me, if there was a button on a synth that said hit single, I would have pressed it as often as anybody else would have, but there wasn't. It was all written by humans." So just to wrap it up, thank you for your patience. If we can learn anything from the past and bring it now to the present, is that new creative breakthroughs, they're nothing but an invitation. They're an invitation to express ourselves, to push what makes us human, to reinvent ourselves. And ultimately, of course, that invitation to finally get weird. Thanks for having me.